All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of the Revelation Drive podcast, a podcast for discovering independent Christian music near you. My name is Devin. I am your host, and if you like Christian rock music, you can find my stuff on YouTube and Spotify and wherever you find your music. This is going to be the first episode. This is just kind of a test run for everything to make sure everything works. That's why there's no guest here for this first one. But you're probably looking at this and asking yourself, what is this podcast? What am I trying to do here? Well, the thing is, I have a lot of friends who also make their own independent Christian music who don't really have a way of showing people, hey, I exist. Like usually in the Christian world, you're either like playing in churches or you're on Christian radio or you're nobody. And there's not really an in-between. Like I remember one time at work, I was listening to this playlist on Spotify for independent Christian music. There's probably only like 2 or 3 songs on it that I liked. So, that might make you think, well, maybe indie Christian music just isn't that good. But honestly, I disagree. I think it just needs a fair chance to be shown to people. So in future episodes of this podcast, I will be interviewing my friends, other musicians, other bands who are also making their music. And I kind of just think of it as like having a talk with my friends, like just hanging out with them and hearing their stories and what they're trying to make. So I kind of got this idea from 2 different places. One is I used to be on tour with a missionary group called Circuit Riders. They're affiliated with YWAM. They're like a sister program. YWAM goes all over the world and preaches the gospel. Circuit Riders focuses more on college campuses in the United States. And so I used to be on tour with them because they would have worship nights and they needed bands to go on the tours with them. And my friends on it told me that I would be really good at doing a podcast. And they even came up with a name for it, Revelation Road, which I thought was a cool name. That was actually what I was going to name this podcast, but it's already taken. So I had to come up with something pretty similar. And my last name is Kahre. It's spelled different. It's Kahre, but it's different spelling, but it's still a car like you drive. Like if you're part of the Kahre family, you get car puns everywhere you go, so you just learn to live with it. So I figured I'll just literally go with it, and it was like, I'm a car, we're driving, that's how it's gonna work. Sorry if this looks really unprofessional and put together. It is. I'm kind of like against, in some ways, the idea of polishing things so professionally that it looks fake and insincere. You know what I mean? I would rather do something like this where, it's not entirely put together as good as it could be, but at least what you're getting is the real deal. Like maybe it's not well rehearsed or something isn't in the right place or whatever, or the camera quality could be better, but at least that I'm not trying to sell you something necessarily. Well, except for my friend's music and my own, but I think you can do that in a way where you're being sincere with people and know you're not just there to use them. And I think one way I can do that is by not trying to make every single little thing like as polished and professional as possible. Now, obviously, I have wanting to put some effort in that. I want to be able to have some level of well done presentation so that I take this seriously, but just not to the extent where it feels plastic. You know what I mean? Like there's so many like TV shows and music today that just, it's so obsessed with being professional and polished that it's just fake. You know what I mean? And I don't want this to be fake. I want this to be a real thing. So when I have my friends on this, I really kind of just think of it as me just having a talk with my friends about their music and letting people get to listen in on it and watch it. So yeah, that's a fun idea. But I figured since I'm just doing like a test run for this first episode, instead of talking about a friend's music, I may as well just talk about my music, talk about myself. If you're watching this first episode when it's coming out, then you probably already know who I am, know what kind of music that I make. But some of you might be watching this from the future after this podcast has taken off and lots of people listen to it. Hint, hint. In that case, I will tell you more about myself, but you probably already know from seeing me host those other episodes. But I make Christian punk rock music, and in my opinion, it's a genre that has never quite reached its full potential in the Christian market. I know in the mid-2000s there was a lot of Christian punk bands, like Christian pop punk bands, but I've listened to a few of them and I feel like they don't really hold a candle to the real pop punk and alt rock bands. You know, people like Green Day, Blink-182, Paramore, stuff like that. I think that it was kind of just a watered down version in the Christian world. I think they just were trying to copy what those bands were doing, but they didn't like fully grasp what made that music special. And I'm not trying to harp on anybody who made music back then. It's never clicked with me personally. I just felt like there was a level of excellence in the musicianship in the secular punk rock bands that Christian music never really caught up to. And so when I started making my music, I was trying to get a little bit closer to that, like really hone in on what makes punk rock special, but also like be genuine and sincere with my testimony and my faith and my lyrics. Like, that's another reason I don't like most Christian punk bands, is because I feel like a lot of them that say they're Christian, they don't really talk about Jesus that much. A lot of it is very vague and metaphorical. Like Flyleaf, for example, like that's a good band and I like their lyrics, but you have to listen to it like 4 or 5 times before you know for sure that they're talking about God and about Christianity. I would rather just slap people in the face with what I'm trying to say, you know, and just get to the point, you know, because punk rock has already seen its heyday and Christian music is already doing its own thing over here. So the only way to really like stand out with that, I think, in the modern era is to just go ahead and make it really like blunt and in your face, and like you know what this song is about from the first time that you listen to it. So one of the things that I want to talk to people about when they come on my podcast is just share their testimony, because it is a Christian podcast. So I'll have people start with their testimony. So I'll start off by telling you mine. This is just going to be a brief version of it. I grew up in church. My parents were missionaries. When I was 11, I spent 5 months living in Haiti because my mom's big dream was to be a missionary nurse, and she accomplished that. And she did it while raising 3 kids, which I think is pretty impressive. After I became an adult, I had a season in my life where I was mad at God and rebelled against him pretty hardcore. Pretty much just went against everything I was taught my whole life. It took me some time to really figure out what it is that I was mad about, and come to terms with it. But while I was away, I really got into punk rock music, and I started listening to some of those bands that I told you about and some more. And during that time, I was probably in like 3 or 4 different bands, and they all fell apart for one reason or another. Like, they didn't really get into like the live show playing phase, or even the going to the studio and making music phase. They fell apart pretty quickly. And there was this one time I went to church again with my parents. I hadn't been to church in a few years, and I went to use the bathroom after the worship set. And I came back, and I saw that on my way back from the bathroom, the band was sitting outside of the sanctuary. They were just talking about how the set went, and they were laughing, and they were having a good time. I kind of had like this epiphany moment where I realized like that's all I ever wanted out of a band. It wasn't necessarily about trying to get famous or make a lot of money. I kind of just wanted to have like that level of community and fellowship out of music. So I prayed to God for the first time in a long time, and I asked him, like, if my gift for music is from you and you want me to make music, then just give me an opportunity to use it. Like, I'll use it as long as you give me a chance. And a few months later, I was at work, and this lady came through my line, just found out from a coworker that I played guitar, and she said that her church was looking for a guitar player. Didn't interview me, didn't want to know about who I am or where I came from, just invited me to play in the church band. And then when I got there, I had some friends there who were also really into punk rock music as well. And I was just like, man, like the only way this could have happened is if God heard my prayer and he answered it, you know? And so I decided I wanted to know God for who he really is, and not just what I had been told my whole life in church. Like, if what I was told my whole life was true, then great, but if there's more to it, I wanted to know that. And so that's how I got involved in Circuit Riders. I started just doing a normal YWAM discipleship training school, but after I finished that, I ended up moving to Circuit Riders instead and doing another school with them and going on tour with them. And that was just a good time for me to really grow up and come to terms with my faith and my wrestling with God. And after I came home, shortly after that is when COVID happened, and I just kind of had this feeling like I needed to stop wasting time looking for like the perfect bandmate to help me make this thing happen. I needed to just get out there and put some music out there that tells the truth, that tells people what God has to say about what's going on in the world with COVID. And so that's how I started getting into the studio and making music. My first EP was Ever Present. It's on my shirt here. It's based on Psalm 46, which says that God is an ever-present help in times of trouble. He's our refuge and strength, and therefore we will not be afraid. So the idea was I would tell people like, hey, don't freak out about COVID. Like, God is with us no matter what. He is present in our lives even now. The reason that I made a ship helm as the logo was that one of my songs on that EP, Above the Waves, talks about how God is here through the trials and storms that I face. And how I will rise above those raging waters and waves in that storm to see him and see where he's leading me. And it's almost as if God is like the helm of the ship. Like he is leading me and driving me and steering me where he wants me to be so that I can make it through any storm or trial that I find myself going through. So that all happened around COVID time in 2020. And then a few years later, a friend of my church told me that he would make me a music video for my musician, my solo artist program. And I thought about it for a while because the original plan was for me to do a music video from Ever Present, but I just thought about it and I was like, no, I have more songs to share with people. I've got better songs than what's on Ever Present, and I want to share one of those with people. And so I decided to get back into the studio, and we made this new song called When I Believe, and it's now on YouTube if you want to watch it. As of right now, it's my second most watched video. I would really love to make it my first most watched video. As of this recording, it's only about like 30 views behind. So if you know a friend who hasn't seen it yet, like please share it with them. But the idea behind When I Believe is that Jesus said that anything is possible to the one that believes. And all throughout the Bible, you see stories of people who God came to them and said, I'm going to do this. And that person chose to believe it, and they did it. And God did something amazing in that moment. You see it in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And you see it today, too, with believers who go and do these amazing, incredible things. And they just make it happen. God's the one who does the amazing thing through them, but they have to make a choice that they're going to believe what God said. And so for me, what I choose to believe is that God didn't make me good at music by accident. He didn't make me a good songwriter by accident. He gave me a gift and he expects me to share it. And I'm at a point in my life now where I just want to share it in any capacity that I can. I don't really care if it's professional enough or put together enough. Like, I've been sitting around like for ages, like waiting for like the stars to align on certain things. And I just think it's better to just go for it, you know, and just let the pieces fall where they fall. Let the people who watch, let the people who listen, and the people who don't, just whatever, you know. If they don't want to, I can't make them, you know. Somebody out there, I believe, needs to hear my music, because I think God wants to speak through the songs that I have to share with people. And the thing I love about the music video for When I Believe is the story that I have in the video of the two dancers and the girl not being able to complete the routine, getting frustrated with it, trying over and over and not getting it, but choosing to believe that she can do it and persevering and trying again until she finally gets it. I feel like in a lot of ways it's a mirror image of like my story with music, because at this point, if you count like church bands and missionary bands, I've been in like 20 different bands at this point. And so far, it's been a lot of fun, but so far, the audience for those projects has been very, very minimal. You know what I mean? And so that was another reason I wanted to do this podcast, was because I feel like a great way to tell people about my music and that it exists is by talking to my friends about their music and just casually throwing in like, hey, I also do music myself. You can find it right here on this channel if you want. I actually got the idea from a guy named Len Dawson. So one thing you might not know about me is that I was born in Kansas City, Olathe to be more specific. And so my family is all huge Chiefs and Royals fans. So I'm not like a Mahomes bandwagoner, if that's what you think. I've been cheering for the Chiefs like for a really, really long time. And there was a 50-year period where they never won a Super Bowl. And so because a lot of us fans were waiting and waiting and waiting just to see another Super Bowl, because we didn't know if it was ever going to happen, we had a tendency to kind of like mystify and deify the one Super Bowl they did win, which was all the way back in 1969. And the quarterback was Len Dawson on that team. What you might not know about that Chiefs team is that Len Dawson was actually hurt for a lot of that season. And so while he was recovering, he took on work as a interviewer for a news station, like a reporter. And like he'd actually go to the Chiefs practices in suits and like interview different players for the local Kansas City news. And I always thought that was such a great idea. It was like, this guy could like, he didn't want to like rub it in your face that he's a superstar. He was always like trying to just be like a class act and a professional in everything he did. Like if you fast forward to 2015, I was in Kansas City. I was watching a Chiefs game at my uncle's house, and the Chiefs lost that game. And the news was on like right after the game, and so Len Dawson like did a report live one second. Sorry about that. Live from the stadium after the game was over. And he talked about how the game went and how he was sad because like one of our best players was out for the season and they were like 1-4 or 1-5 at that point. I just remember at the end he was like, from Arrowhead Stadium, I'm Len Dawson, such and such Kansas City station news. I just remember thinking like, man, he's like so mature and professional and such a class act. Like at that point he was the only quarterback to ever win a Super Bowl for the Chiefs. So as far as like the city of Kansas City is concerned, he's like royalty, and he could shove that in your face if he wanted to, and he never did. Like he was always like a class act and a professional. And I just loved that idea. I always thought that was a great idea, that like in the midst of your success doing what you love doing, you can also do something else on the side of it that brings attention to other people and shows them the special things that they do, you know? And that's what I want to do with this podcast is like, I can't promise that there will be a ton of episodes like right out of the gate, because I can really only do episodes as I have people to interview. But I do have some friends like in my church that, and just around the US that also make music. There'll be lots of opportunities to share episodes and make episodes with them and share their music with you. And it's like all kinds of stuff too. There's like more punk rock stuff, yeah, but there's also like, you know, rockabilly stuff from the 1950s. There's like more soul stuff, more emotional stuff, even just some more contemporary styles of music. And so I think it would be a lot of fun to give those people an opportunity to share with you the kind of music that they make as well. And to me, it's like a win-win situation, because if this podcast does well and takes off, then it's just an opportunity for me to share my music in the midst of sharing other people's music. And if my music takes off and does well, then I can just keep doing episodes of this podcast and showing off like what my friends can do and what other Christian musicians I meet along the way can do. And so, you know, like it's like the old saying, like a rising tide lifts all boats. It's like, I don't care how the tide rises or why it rises. It's just, I'm just happy to just share with people, share what God has given me to do and what he's given my friends to do. And so I don't know if every episode will be this length of time, but it depends on how much my friends have to talk about. But I think this is going to be about where I wrap it up for my episode. Thanks. If you listened all the way, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. I know a lot of YouTubers like shove that down your throat. Likes, comment, subscribe. Do it. But the reason they do that is the more you do that stuff, the more YouTube recommends their channel to other people. So if you haven't subscribed yet, I would really appreciate it. And just again, friendly reminder, When I Believe is on YouTube now. Share it with some friends if you haven't already. Thanks for taking the time. My name's Devin. I'll see you next time. Bye.